Trevs show. I'm the Trev. It's too sweet. Anyway, continuing with retired numbers. Well, this is the second number retired by the Senators. This is the first one retired by the Ottawa Senators as we know them, as the number 8, which was retired for Frank Finnegan, was more or less to honor the first version of the Senators, and I'm working on that one. But either way, we're talking about the number 11, which is worn by Daniel Alfredsson. Let's check it out. So Daniel Alfredsson's 17-season stint with the Ottawa Senators would begin on June 29th, 1994, when Alfie was selected 133rd by the Ottawa Senators in the 1994 entry draft. So to break that down in the simplest of terms, that's the third selection in the 6th round. So you want to talk about a steal. That's a steal right there. So after spending a year in the Swedish Elite League, just to tool on his game, he would debut with the club on October 7th, 1995. And he would come on to a Senators team that was still in its 4th year of existence and still statistically bad, for the simplest of terms. It was so bad for the Senators in the 95-96 season, they went through 3 head coaches. So if that gives you any indication of how bad they were up until that point, that should tell you. But for Alfredsson, it really wasn't all that bad. I mean, he did play in his first of 6 NHL All-Star games. So for the season he had, it wasn't all that bad. He was still named to the NHL's All-Rookie team, as well as being awarded the Calder Memorial Trophy as Rookie of the Year, as in an 82-game schedule, the only time he would ever play a full 82-game schedule. He would lead the team in all offensive categories when it came to scoring, putting up 26 goals, and adding 35 assists for 61 points. It's also worth noting that this would be only one of 3 seasons in Alfredsson's 18-year career that he would be on a team that missed the playoffs. So with that being said, the Ottawa Senators had a considerably better 96-97 season, seeing the team finish 3rd in the Northeast Division, which was the highest they'd ever finished up until that point. We also see them make the playoffs for the first time in team history. And it would be also the first time they didn't finish last. So there's that too. More importantly, it would be the first of 11 straight playoff appearances for the Senators. Now Alfredsson will put up 71 points in 76 games, while adding 7 points in 7 playoff games. So, point per game average in the playoffs, where it matters. Point per game all year. It's not a bad thing. So the 97-98 campaign started off with Alfredsson and the team in a contract dispute. But within 5 games of the season beginning, that dispute was solved rather quickly, and Alfredsson would return to the team. However, and this would be the story here, pretty much in most seasons, not all seasons, but a few seasons, injury would limit Alfredsson only to 55 games. But in those 55 games, he put up 45 points, while adding 9 points in 11 playoff games, which, while it was only 11 games, still saw the Senators enter the 2nd round for the first ever time. The 98-99 season would see the Senators win the Northeast Division for the first time, and would see Alfredsson miss 24 games, again due to injury, seeing him only put up 33 points in 58 games. And while the Senators had all kinds of newfound momentum, their playoff ride would only last 4 games, seeing them swept by the eventual Stanley Cup finalists in the Buffalo Sabres, with Alfie putting up 3 points in those 4 games. The 99-2000 season would see the Senators strip their then-captain, Alexei Yashin, of his captaincy, and they would award it to Alfie, and that would be a role he would hold till 2013. And despite being limited only to 57 games, again due to injury, Alfred would put up 59 points. including a team-leading 38 assists while adding 4 points in 6 playoff games, as the Senators would lose to the Toronto Maple Leafs. A new trend they ultimately just decided to develop. We'll get into it. The 2000-2001 season would see Yashin return to the club, but Alfie kept the seat, and rightfully so. And while Alfie didn't lead in any of the statistical categories, as that all went to Yashin, he did still manage 70 points in 68 games, so still playing a point per game average. While Senators would win their second division title in 3 years. And while the Senators were still riding that momentum of winning the division again, they would also run into the Toronto Maple Leafs again in the first round, being swept in 4, with Alfie putting up 1 goal in those 4 games. Ouch. The 01-02 season saw Alfie's production increase, with a team leading 37 goals and 71 points in 78 games. And the Senators would make the playoffs again, going as far as conference semifinals, where they would, again, meet the Maple Leafs and lose again for the 3rd year. For the 3rd year, it just wasn't nice. This time Alfredsson would put up 7... Alfredsson would lead the team with 13 points in 12 playoff games. But again, to lose to the Maple Leafs. The 02-03 season would see the Senators not only win the division again, but also see them win the President's Trophy for the first and, so far, as of this recording, only time in team history. Now Alfredsson, for his part, played at a point-per-game status, putting up 78 points in just as many games, including a team-leading 51 assists. Now, of course, the Senators made the playoffs, and for the first time in 3 years, they didn't play the Maple Leafs, which proved to be a great thing, as the Senators would advance all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals. Now, unfortunately for the Senators, they would run into the eventual Stanley Cup champs in the New Jersey Devils, losing in 7 games. Alfredsson would put up 12 points in 18 playoff games, so he kept them in. For the 03-04 season, Alfredsson would continue his point-per-game production, putting up 80 points in 77 games. And while the Senators didn't win the division for the 03-04 season, they did still qualify for the playoffs. But unfortunately, as you would guess, they met their provincial rivals in the Toronto Maple Leafs. And the Senators were actually not swept this time, but they were eliminated in 7 games. Now Alfredsson would only be limited to 3 points in those 7 games, but the season wasn't all that bad, as he was the runner-up for the Lady Byng Memorial Trophy, which is awarded to the most gentlemanly player for the year. And then the big one happened. The 04-05 season would see Alfredsson, along with a lot of other players, make an exodus to Sweden, or at least any part of Europe or Russia that they would sign with, seeing Alfredsson rejoin his Swedish junior club for the season. But when the NHL came back for 05-06, so did Alfredsson. And thanks to the offseason the Senators had, and a few wheels and deals that would eventually send Marian Hossa to Atlanta, with the return being Danny Heatley, which would also see, paired with Jason Spezza, to what would become known as the Cash Line. Cash being the acronym for Captain Alfredsson, Spezza, and Heatley. Cash. And that line would not disappoint, as Alfredsson would not only finish in the top 10 in league scoring for the first time in his career, tied for 4th with said line mate Danny Heatley, he also put up career highs all across the board, scoring 43 goals to add 60 assists for 103 points. On top of earning his only second NHL All-Star Team nomination, he also had the distinction of being the first captain, or player, for that matter, to score in a shootout, as the shootout was introduced for the 05-06 season. He was also a finalist for the Selke Memorial Trophy, and 4th in Lady Byng Memorial Trophy voting. The Senators would make it to the Eastern Conference semifinals, but would be eliminated by the Buffalo Sabres in 5 games. All told, the Senators managed 10 games, with Alfredsson going point per game again, adding 10 points. The 06-07 season would see Alfredsson start off a bit slower than usual. So much so to the point that Alfie briefly considered retirement in November of 2006. But the story goes, all he had to do was switch skates with teammate Chris Kelly, and he would improve with goals in his next 4 games. So really all you need is a used pair of skates from a teammate. Hope they fit well. Alfredsson would also contribute his 600th career point with a 3-point night on December 23rd, 2006. And while he would add 87 points in 77 games, it was definitely not the 103 from the year before. But his 58 assists did lead the team. And if we've learned anything when it comes to the Senators and the playoffs, it's that good things happen when the Senators don't play the Maple Leafs. As the Senators went on a 12-3 run in these playoffs, eliminating the Pittsburgh Penguins, New Jersey Devils, and Buffalo Sabres in 5 games each to reach the Stanley Cup final for the first and so far only time in franchise history. In making it that far, Alfredsson became the first European-trained captain to captain a team to the Stanley Cup finals, and as you can tell, he did touch the trophy, if that superstition means anything to you. As for said Stanley Cup run, though, it was eventual kind of turn of face as they were eliminated in 5 themselves by the Anaheim Ducks to lose the Stanley Cup finals. And though losing the cup sucks, no matter who you are, Alfredsson would tie for the league lead in playoff points with a career-high 22 points in 22 games, as well as a career-high 14 goals. Not surprisingly, Jason Spezza and Danny Heatley were the 2 he were tied with. The general consensus, though, was that Alfredsson was, and I'm not even going to disagree with this, the best player in the Stanley Cup Finals, not just for the Senators, but all the way around. His play would allude to that. I mean, do yourself a favor, pause this video, come back after, check out some of Alfie's highlights in the 07 Stanley Cup Finals. You'll see the point. Now, for the 07-08 season, the hope was definitely to make it back to the Stanley Cup Finals. And near the halfway point, it showed some promise, as by the All-Star break, Alfredsson found himself leading the league in points for the first time ever. Now, on top of that, Alfredsson also set a team record for most points in a game after he scored 3 goals and added 4 assists against the Tampa Bay Lightning during the season. For the second half, though, Alfredsson would be hit by various injuries, not just one, but a few, which would see him play in only 70 games. And the team play, while still good enough for second in the division, would see the team seeded 7th for the playoff bracket. And in those 70 games, Alfredsson would finish 9th in league scoring with 89 points. But it would be the injuries that would see him miss the Senators' first 2 playoff games, which ended Alfredsson's streak of playing in every playoff game in team history up to that point. Now, Alfredsson would put up no points in those 2 games, but it would later be admitted that he was playing with a ruptured MCL during those 2 playoff games. That's what happens when you come back earlier than expected. You don't play so well. The 08-09 season would see a lot of change happen in Ottawa, and unfortunately it didn't benefit the Senators one bit, as the team missed the playoffs for the first time since Alfredsson's rookie season. Now, for his part, Alfie would put up a team-leading 50 assists to go with his team-leading 74 points in 79 games. So his point-per-game average has kind of fallen off by this point. Now, before the 2009-2010 season began, Alfredsson would become the longest-serving captain in the NHL at that point in time, as Saku Koivu, who was Montreal's captain for 10 years, signed in Anaheim, and Joe Sakic, who was Colorado's captain for 14 years, retired. That notwithstanding, the 9-10 season would see the cash line broken up, as Danny Heatley asked for and received a trade out of Ottawa. However, it wasn't all bad, as Alfredsson did play in his 1,000th regular season game and still managed to lead the team in assists with 43 and points with 85 in 70 games. The Senators would make it back to the playoffs, but would be eliminated in 6 games, with Alfredsson tying for the team lead in points with 8. And much like the 07-08 season, it would be announced that Alfredsson would be playing through an injury, this time through a sports hernia. I mean, though it's not nearly as bad as a ruptured MCL, it's still not advisable to want to be playing through any kind of injury, but you do what you do for the team, right? The 2010-11 season would start off nicely in the first month anyway, with Alfredsson recording his 1,000th career point on October 22nd against Buffalo. But that would really be the only positive. The Senators would miss the playoffs again, and Alfredsson would be limited to 54 games, again due to injury, but he did manage to have 31 points in those 54 games. The 2011-12 season would see Alfredsson play in his 6th and final All-Star game, but this one was a bit unique. The Senators were hosting the 2012 NHL All-Star game, and the NHL was naming their All-Star teams after players instead of conferences, just to keep interest into the All-Star game, which is a different debate for a different day. So the decision was made that Alfredsson would be the captain for Team Alfredsson. Now, the beauty of this was teams were drafted by the team captains and their alternates, so Alfredsson had a hand in drafting basically everybody who played on that team with them that day. Now, while Alfredsson would score 2 consecutive goals in the second period, Team Alfredsson would lose to Team Chara 12-9. However, Alfredsson's production would continue to be on the decline, with Alfie putting up 59 points in 75 games. And while the Senators did make the playoffs, they would lose in 7 games to the New York Rangers, with Alfredsson scoring 2 goals in 4 games. Now, Alfredsson would also take home some hardware, as he would be named the recipient of the King Clancy Memorial Trophy, which is awarded for leadership qualities on and off the ice while making a significant humanitarian contribution to the community. He was also a 3rd place finalist for the Bill Masterton Memorial Trophy, which is awarded to dedication to hockey. And then we had another lockout. Now, while this lockout didn't take a whole season, a lot of players still went to go to Europe to go play. Alfredsson didn't. He stayed behind, probably just to rest, recover some nagging injuries. But when the NHL came back, they came back for a 48-game schedule, and Alfredsson came back for his 17th and final season with the Ottawa Senators. And despite the Senators being hit by the injury bug during the season, Alfredsson only managed to miss 1 game, putting up 26 points in those 47 games. And even though those 26 points are a career low for Alfredsson, one could easily blame the 48-game schedule, because I'm sure if it was a full 82, it might be a different story. Now, during the playoffs, the Senators would go as far as the conference semifinals before being eliminated by the Pittsburgh Penguins. Now, Alfredsson would lead the team with 10 points in just as many playoff games. And Alfredsson would also be taking home the Mark Messier Leadership Award, which is awarded to the player recognized as a true leader on and off the ice, while being a contributing member of society. So, another humanitarian award. Now, despite all signs saying Alfredsson was going to retire as a Senator, he decided he wanted to have another crack at winning a Stanley Cup, and did like so many players did, signed with the Detroit Red Wings as a free agent on July 5th, 2013. But that's not where our story ends. Now, after spending a year with Detroit, Alfredsson found himself again as a free agent. And up to this point, nobody had re-signed him. Of course, he was also dealing with his back issues. So his 14-15 season was looking like it wasn't going to happen. So, struggling with said back issues. Alfredsson signed a 1-day contract on December 4th, 2014, and promptly announced his retirement from the NHL, and got to do it as an Ottawa Senator. So that about wraps up the story of Daniel Alfredsson's career in Ottawa, but more importantly, the number 11. So let's talk some stats. In his 17 seasons with the Ottawa Senators, he played in 1,178 games, which was a team record at the time of his departure. His 426 goals, 682 assists, and 1,108 points are still team records, as are his 121 playoff games played, 51 goals, 49 assists, and 100 points. He played in 6 NHL All-Star games in 1996, 1997, 1998, 2004, 2008, and was the captain of his own team in 2012. He made the NHL All-Rookie team in 1996. He was a second-team All-Star in 2006. He won the Calder Memorial Trophy in 1996, the King Clancy Memorial Trophy in 2012, and the Mark Messier Leadership Award in 2013. Now, on top of his career stats, as far as being a Senator is concerned, he also holds a team record for the highest plus-minus rating in a season, with a plus 42 from the 06-07 season, and has the most point in a game record with 7, which we talked about in the 2007-2008 season. As far as NHL records, he was the first player/captain to score or shoot in a shootout. He was the first European captain to take a team to the Stanley Cup Finals. He was elected to the Hockey Hall of Fame in 2022. The first modern-day Senator and the second Senator to have his jersey retired when they retired the number 11 on December 29th, 2016. And that's the story of the number 11 in Ottawa. There's my own opinion of the guy. If it weren't for injuries, he could have been so much better. I mean, he was already a gifted playmaker to begin with. I mean, watching him play, watching his game grow, for the time I got to watch him play, and I got to watch him play his entire career, he had silky hands. He could turn on the jets when he had to. He can score nice goals. Not all of them were pretty highlight reel goals, but the ones that were, they were pretty sick. I mean, obviously his best years was when he had his best line, that being the cash line. But even with just Spezza, after Heatley was traded, and even before Heatley came along, there was good chemistry between them anyways. And the fact that they could feed one another, it made for great hockey in Ottawa. It was a blast watching him play. Not so much because he was a European or Swedish or, seemed to be a thorn in the side of the Maple Leafs. And I mean, anybody that's a thorn in the side of the Maple Leafs is always a great player. But just the playmaking ability you could see on him and that he brought to the table every night. And this is why I've always said you need international ice surfaces in the NHL, but I don't know how well I'll win that argument. Either way, fun player to watch. I mean, if you never got the chance to watch him, check out some YouTube clips after you're done watching this video. You won't regret it. So, my Chess Hockey Shows, I want to thank you for tuning in. If you've made it this far, thank you very much. I do appreciate you very much. This went a little bit longer than expected, but hey, this is going to probably be the norm for videos like this. And there's a lot of players that have just as long or just as storied a career to talk about on the retired numbered list. So please don't be mad at content. But if you like it, if you like what you've seen, if you dig what I'm doing, if you've made it this far, you just want to say hi, give me a thumbs up. It helps more than you could ever know. If you want, that red button says subscribe all over it. What are you waiting for, man? You know you want to. It makes you feel good. And we're trying to get to 250. I mean, we didn't hit 200 by the end of the year. That's okay. I didn't even do 40 jerseys or 40 retired numbers by the end of the year, but I came close. Either way. Subscribe makes you feel good. Let's do it. Social, my lone social. Description down below. Let's move forward as far as retired numbers is concerned. For 23, I at least want to do 20. I want to make a huge dent in this list, but I don't want to burn myself out to do it. So if I can at least hit 20, great. I definitely want to shoot for more than 20, but we'll see what happens. Either way, here's hoping we at least have every team that has a retired number started next year. Because I know there's at least one team. One hasn't retired a number yet. One I haven't started yet that I should have talked about a while ago. But it's going to be another long one. Either way, in the meantime, in between time, be looking for more videos from the Trev. Later.